What if I told you a man with no spy training, no black ops clearance, and no authority whatsoever convinced former intelligence agents that he was working deep undercover for the CIA? No, this isn't a rejected Hollywood script. This actually happened. Meet Garrison Courtney, the man who turned Washington, D.C. into his personal stage and played everyone like a damn fiddle. He said the government would deny everything. He said billions were flowing through a classified program, and if you wanted in, you had to shut up and pay up. And they did, over and over again. Because who questions a CIA asset when national security is on the line? But what happens when the lies stack so high, even the government starts asking questions? This is the insane true story of the fake spy who fooled Washington. And trust me, you've never seen a con this bold. Before Garrison Courtney became the CIA asset who conned the U.S. government out of millions, he was just a guy. Born in Montana, raised in Washington State, Garrison didn't exactly grow up dreaming of espionage. There were no spy academies, no black ops internships. Just your average suburban kid with a flair for storytelling and a talent for making people believe things. He studied communications at the University of Montana, and after a short stint as a TV weatherman, yes, a weatherman, he transitioned into PR roles. From media gigs, he worked his way into the political machine, eventually landing a job as the spokesman for the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, in the early 2000s. Not bad for a local news guy, right? He had the charm, the voice, the presence, but he wanted more. After leaving the DEA, Garrison bounced around a few government contractor roles, but that thirst for significance, it never went away. And this is where things start to get real CIA. And by real CIA, I mean completely made up. It started small, a conversation here, a hint there. He dropped subtle clues in meetings, talking vaguely about classified projects, using phrases like can't confirm or deny. The kind of language that instantly makes people lean in and think, wait, is this guy serious? But Garrison wasn't just talking the talk. He was building a character. He told select defense contractors that he was a deep cover CIA agent. His mission? To create a commercial cover for covert operations. He said the US government needed private companies to help run off the books missions, so if anyone asked, these companies would appear to be regular businesses, but in reality, they'd be supporting national security. Wild, yes, but in post-9/11 America, it made sense. After the attacks on September 11, everything changed. People were scared. The government was on high alert. The Patriot Act gave federal agencies new powers to monitor, search, and act without much oversight. Security became the top priority, and with that came a huge wave of government spending, much of it secret. This money was poured into what they called the black budget. Billions of dollars were going into classified programs that even Congress didn't fully understand. If something was labeled top secret or national security, people stopped asking questions. Garrison Courtney knew this, and he used fake documents, fake immunity letters, and even set up meetings in real government buildings to blend his lies so neatly that it fooled everyone. But what's the reason it worked so well? The system let it happen. In the years after September 11th, saying it's classified was enough to shut people up. Even high-up officials didn't know what everyone else was doing. That confusion? Courtney used it like a weapon, and deep down people wanted to believe him, because believing him meant money, power, and access. This wasn't just one guy lying. It was a scam that fit perfectly into a system built on fear, secrecy, and silence. Courtney claimed his operations were funded by non-attributable financing, code for you'll never find it. He promised contracts worth hundreds of millions, but only if the companies played by his rules. Rule 1, total secrecy. Rule 2, never contact the CIA to verify anything. Rule 3, you'd get reimbursed for expenses, eventually, and somehow it worked. These weren't amateur victims. These were high-level government contractors, many of them former intelligence officers themselves. But Courtney spoke their language. He threw around acronyms. He referenced fake ops with code names like Alpha 214. He told them his handlers would deny everything, and just to make it all more convincing, he told them, "This program is so sensitive, you could go to prison just for asking questions." He convinced real firms to put him on their payrolls. They paid him hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, believing they were part of a top-secret, ultra-patriotic mission. And when one company started doubting him, he'd tell another company to vouch for him. Between 2012 and 2016, Garrison Courtney convinced at least a dozen companies to pay him under the guise of supporting a classified intelligence program. In total, Courtney defrauded these companies of over $4.4 million. Only two of the biggest chippers in this scheme were made public. Number 1, Cape First Funding, a Virginia-based investment firm, was one of the primary victims. Courtney persuaded Cape First to pay off a $1.9 million debt he owed to another company, under the pretense that the government would reimburse them once the supposed classified program concluded. Number 2, Blue Canopy, a cybersecurity firm in Reston, Virginia, now owned by Jacobs Engineering, employed Courtney as a contractor. He convinced the company to pay him, claiming it was part of a secret task force initiative. When Blue Canopy sought reimbursement for approximately $2 million they believed was owed by the government, Courtney facilitated a deal where Cape First Funding paid Blue Canopy, again under false pretenses. While specific names of other defrauded companies are not publicly disclosed, court documents indicate that Courtney approached numerous private companies with variations of his fabricated story. He claimed these companies needed to hire and pay him to create commercial cover for his alleged CIA affiliation. He assured them that these payments would be reimbursed through future government contracts associated with the fictitious classified program. Courtney's scheme was elaborate and convincing. He even created fake letters, purportedly from the Attorney General, granting blanket immunity to participants of the supposed program. His actions not only caused significant financial harm, but also exploited the trust and integrity of individuals and organizations dedicated to national security. Yes, he created a fake spy network of victims unknowingly validating each other's scams. At one point, Courtney had multiple contractors paying him simultaneously, all thinking they were in on the same secret op, none realizing they were the mark. It was spy fiction, played out in real life, and no one dared speak up. Because who wants to be the guy that exposes a CIA operation and accidentally lands on a watch list? Courtney had found his formula: wrap a lie in patriotism, protect it with fear, and deliver it with confidence. And the scariest part, it was working. But as the con expanded, so did the risk. And in Washington, D.C., the higher you climb, the more eyes are watching. Garrison Courtney's transformation from a former DEA spokesman to a self-proclaimed covert CIA operative was nothing short of audacious. Armed with a fabricated backstory, he convinced at least a dozen companies to place him on their payrolls, claiming it was part of a classified CIA program requiring commercial cover. He promised them lucrative government contracts and reimbursements, all under the guise of national security. To bolster his credibility, Courtney employed several tactics: use of government facilities. He held meetings in sensitive compartmented information facilities, areas designated for handling classified information, to lend authenticity to his claims. Fabricated documentation. He presented fake non-disclosure agreements and other documents to convince companies of the program's legitimacy. Name-dropping and false associations. Courtney claimed endorsements from high-ranking officials, including the President and the Director of National Intelligence, to dissuade skepticism. Courtney's manipulation extended beyond the private sector. He managed to secure a position at the National Institutes of Health Information Technology Acquisition and Assessment Center as a private contractor. This role granted him access to sensitive information about federal agencies, which he exploited to further his scheme. Despite the red flags, many of Courtney's victims remained silent, fearing repercussions for questioning a supposed covert operation. This culture of secrecy and fear allowed the fraud to persist for years. This raises pressing questions. How did a single individual without CIA credentials infiltrate both private companies and government agencies? What systemic vulnerabilities allowed such a scheme to flourish unchecked for years? How can organizations better verify claims involving classified operations without compromising national security? Courtney's case underscores the delicate balance between operational secrecy and accountability. It highlights the need for robust verification processes, even when dealing with purportedly classified information. For a man who lived off lies, Garrison Courtney's greatest enemy wasn't law enforcement, it was time. By 2016, the pressure was building. Too many promises were hanging in the air. Too many payouts were pending. Courtney's empire, built on illusions, was teetering on the edge. And like all cons that grow too fast, it finally caught up with him. The red flags had been stacking up behind the scenes. One of the biggest came from inside the system itself. Lieutenant General Robert Otto of the U.S. Air Force Intelligence. When Courtney approached him with his usual spiel about deep cover CIA missions and secret procurement deals, Otto didn't buy it. Not one bit. Instead, he did what no one else dared. He reported it, and not quietly. With the FBI now involved, the walls began closing in. Courtney, still unaware that his world was crumbling, continued his act. He even doubled down, approaching new targets and attempting to scale the con further. But the Bureau was already tracking him. His meetings were being recorded. Every lie was being logged. Surveillance was building a case, and it was airtight. In June 2020, the mask finally came off. Courtney was arrested and charged with a series of federal offenses, including wire fraud. And just like that, the so-called covert CIA operative was exposed as nothing more than a serial liar with a flair for performance and a gift for manipulation. The courtroom heard it all, how he had defrauded over a dozen companies of more than $4.4 million using a fake identity and government smokescreens. But even in court, Courtney tried to twist reality. He claimed he was recruited into a secret operation, that he had been given orders, just none he could prove. The judge, unmoved, responded with cold clarity. You used fear. You used patriotism. You used people's trust in their government, and you used it all to steal. Courtney pleaded guilty, and in October 2020, he was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. Not quite the ending his movie script life promised, but fitting for a man who played his own fantasy until the final scene. But even more damning was this. According to prosecutors, Courtney wasn't just fooling companies. He had manipulated senior military officials, contracting officers, and federal procurement systems. At one point, he had access to sensitive government contracts worth over $3.7 billion. Let that sink in. How could one man pull this off? Because Courtney tapped into something deeper than deception. He exploited a system built on secrecy, a post-9/11 culture that demanded silence in the name of national security. He preyed on the very trust that binds institutions together. He made people fear that asking questions might put missions or lives at risk. But in the end, all he risked was their money and their credibility. Still, the fallout wasn't just legal, it was personal. Many of the people who worked with Courtney felt betrayed not just as professionals, but as patriots. They believed they were serving their country. They thought they were helping protect lives, and to learn it was all a lie, that stung. Which brings us to a bigger truth. Courtney didn't just run a scam, he exposed a vulnerability in the American system, where charisma and jargon can sometimes outpace logic and accountability. So, what do we learn from this? That even in a world of background checks and billion-dollar contracts, human trust remains the weakest and most powerful link. Could this happen again? Absolutely, because where there's power, secrecy, and money, there's always someone ready to blur the lines. Courtney didn't have superpowers. He didn't hack into databases or wear a disguise. What he did was simpler and scarier. He just knew how to talk the talk. He dressed the part, he dropped the right buzzwords, and most importantly, he knew how to say, "It's classified," with a straight face. And the uncomfortable truth, people let it slide, not because they were dumb, because they were scared to question something that looked official Because they didn't want to miss out on government money. Because if you could get in on a classified CIA operation, wouldn't you want to be part of that club? And that's where the insight hits hard. The biggest scams don't rely on tricking people. They rely on people tricking themselves. So next time someone waves around secrecy like a sword, ask yourself, is it protecting the country or just protecting them? Because in the end, the greatest scams aren't pulled off in the shadows. They're pulled off in broad daylight, right in front of the people too afraid to say, wait a minute. Stay sharp, stay curious, and whatever you do, never stop asking questions. If this made something click, don't ignore that feeling. Like it, send it to someone who thinks, and hit subscribe unless comfort matters more than truth. This isn't just storytelling, it's the system slipping up. More cracks showing soon. Stay ready.